Draco Malfoy and the Horror of the Heir. Written by LilBeans19. Read for you by Gemini Wishes. Chapter 3. The Strangest of Magics. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the 2nd of September, 1992. Naturally, the only thing the whole school seemed interested in the very next morning was what was now dubbed the Weasley Potter Womp. Draco could only just make out a head of scruffy black hair at the overcrowded Gryffindor table. Draco yawned as he sank between Vincent and Gregory at the Slytherin table, plucking his timetable out of the air as it magically popped into existence before him. He snagged a piece of toast from the rack and startled slightly as the butter was suddenly slid right in front of him. He looked up to see Pansy Parkinson sitting opposite him, wearing a suspiciously bright smile. "Parkinson, what are you up to?" Draco asked with trepidation. Clearly, both she and Daphne had gotten over the tea incident on the train, the blonde witch peacefully eating her cereal next to Pansy. "It's Pansy, and I'm not up to anything. I'm just having my breakfast," she explained with a shrug. "Jam?" Draco squinted. He looked down at his toast, then back up at Pansy, then at the jar of strawberry jam in her outstretched hand. "Have you done something to it? Is this a trick?" At that, Pansy laughed. "Don't be daft, Draco," she said, blinking a lot more than seemed necessary. "Have you got something in your eye?" Pansy's face fell as there came what sounded like a badly concealed snicker to her left. Daphne suddenly yelped out in pain as there came a thud from under the table, jangling the cutlery and plates on top. Draco threw a questioning look at Vincent and Gregory, who could only offer an equally baffled shrug in response. Luckily, Draco was saved from Pansy's strange behavior by the stream of owls soaring into the Great Hall, distracting her as she got a neatly wrapped package. Draco began reading his timetable as he nibbled on his deliberately jamless toast, feeling suddenly very excited as he saw that they had doubled defense against the dark arts after an hour of charms first thing. He opened his mouth to say as much to the other second-year Slytherins when he was rudely interrupted by a booming voice that made the very walls of the hall shake. "Ronald Weasley!" Draco recognized that screech from Flourish and Blots. It was the Mother Weasley. "How dare you steal that car?" "Oh, sweet Merlin, someone pinch me. Weasley got a howler," Draco whispered to Gregory and Vincent. Theodore, who had somehow managed to doze off in his scrambled eggs, whined and covered his head with his charms spellbook. "You wait until I get a hold of you. I don't suppose you stopped to think what your father and I went through when we saw it had gone." The Mother Weasley went on like this for another good 5 minutes, until finally the assault on everyone's ears ended and the howler went up in a puff of red smoke. The silence was deafening. Draco peered around Pansy's head, seeing that Harry, now visible, was wearing a similarly dumbstruck expression as Weasley, blinking in wide-eyed shock. Draco couldn't help but laugh, and apparently neither could most of the school, as Weasley turned bright red and Harry hung his head. Charms class whizzed by in a flurry of wand-waving and banishing ghostly ectoplasm as Flitwick had them learning the Scourge charm, which Draco found very unfair indeed. Why should he have to clean up after a stupid ghost? Find a way to make them do it themselves, thank you very much. But as soon as Flitwick dismissed them, Draco felt his mood brighten significantly because he knew what came next. Lockhart. Not even the climb from the 3rd floor to the 7th could dampen Draco's anticipation. As the Slytherins approached the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, their chatter died down as there came the faint sound of a piano being played inside. The second years exchanged uncertain glances. Blaise Zabini tilted his head to the door in a silent gesture at Draco. Draco shook his head vehemently in response. Theodore checked his pocket watch and frowned. Blaise tilted his head again. Draco turned to Gregory and Vincent and copied the motion. "What?" Gregory asked cluelessly. "Oh, for Salazar's sake!" Pansy snapped, rolling her eyes and knocking loudly on the door. The doorknob turned on its own, the door groaning on its hinges as it opened, the sound of the piano, now louder, drifting through the crack. The Slytherins poked their heads around the doorframe, only to see that Gilderoy Lockhart, draped in flattering turquoise robes, sunlight catching his golden hair, was sitting at a grand piano on a raised platform like a makeshift stage in his classroom. Again, The Slytherins exchanged questioning glances. All but Draco, that is, who found himself rather starstruck all of a sudden. Pansy cleared her throat loudly. Lockhart turned to face them, flashing those dazzling white teeth in all their glory. "Ah," he exclaimed, still playing the piano. "You appear to have caught me tickling the ivories, as they say," he chuckled. As he stood up, his piano carried on playing its jazzy tune. Lockhart kicked it hard, and it stopped. He smiled at them again, spreading his arms out grandly as he strode to the center of his stage. "Don't be discouraged. Come in, take a seat. Let us begin." They did as they were told, Draco pushing past Daphne to take the spot closest to Lockhart's desk. "Ugh," groused Daphne as Vincent and Gregory took the other front seats on either side of Draco. Lockhart strode up the aisle of desks and circled around his own desk, propping one leg on his chair and giving them all an even larger grin as his eyes swept across them. "Gilderoy Lockhart," he announced, gesturing to himself. "Order of Merlin, 3rd class, explorer of all things mysteriously magical, honorary member of the Dark Force Defense League, and 5 times winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. But you already know all that, and I suppose to you I'm now simply your wonderful Professor Lockhart." Lockhart struck a heroic pose, still smiling oh so gallantly. Draco leaned forward in his chair. There was a cough from the back of the class as the silence dragged on. Lockhart peeked out of one eye as a smile faltered. Right, no applause, that's fine," he laughed, clapping his hands together. Draco's eyes followed him as he strode across the room. "No matter, you Slytherins have the luck of being my first students, you know." He picked up a stack of parchment. "I've devised a little test, if you will, to kick things off with a bang. How does that sound, eh?" Draco eagerly got at his quill and ink, but once the test had been passed to him, he could only frown down at it, puzzled as he began writing his name at the top. Question 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? Draco knew it was lilac, of course. He had read You Were the Yeti, after all. But he failed to see the relevance between Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite shade of purple and defending yourself from a dark curse. The questions carried on in a similar fashion. Question 2. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? Question 7. When did Gilderoy Lockhart publish his first book? Question 12. Where is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite place to holiday? On it went, all the way to the end of the 3rd page at Question 54. When is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday, and what would his ideal gift be? Draco looked up every so often to find Lockhart swishing about the room in his turquoise robes in a way that oddly reminded him of his father's prized white peacocks. In fact, Draco found he couldn't really stop glancing up. When all the tests had been handed in, Professor Lockhart went through the answers. Draco had gotten the most right, to his delight. Theodore had actually managed to do the worst for once, which was no doubt embarrassing for him. When Lockhart finished telling them about how he'd actually managed to catch all the ghouls in Gadding with Ghouls, Draco had answered correctly, of course. He checked his timepiece, frowning ever so slightly. "That took less time than I'd expected," he hummed and thought. "Any further questions?" "Professor Lockhart, sir?" Draco spoke up, calmly raising a hand. "That's me," Lockhart chuckled. "What's your question, Mr. "Malfoy, sir. Draco Malfoy," Draco replied, leaning back in his chair, attempting to seem as nonchalant as possible. "What would you say is the most dangerous adventure you've ever had?" Lockhart's face lit up. "Ah, now that is a very good question, Mr. Malfoy. Let me tell you all about the time I was exploring the deep heart of the jungles of Wixen, Peru." As Draco left Lockhart's class for lunch, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd actually just sat through 2 hours of. As thrilling as Lockhart's tales were, and as starstruck as Draco felt, he certainly hadn't learned anything about defending himself from a wayward hex or curse. He pondered this even as he made his way out of the Great Hall and down to the courtyard towards Harry, Weasley, and Granger, but found he couldn't ponder for much longer, as there seemed to be a small blonde Gryffindor first-year student getting much too close to Harry for Draco's liking, like a bounding, overexcited puppy yapping at a mile a minute. "Maybe your friend could take it and I could stand next to you, and then could you sign it?" the first year was babbling, and then Draco saw the camera in their hand and realized what was happening. He couldn't believe his ears. "I beg your pardon?" he asked incredulously. "Signed photos, Potter? You're giving out signed photos?" No, that is not what's happening at all," Harry insisted, shaking his head. "Oh, please, Harry, it won't take even a minute, I promise," begged the first year. "You don't have to sign it." Draco rolled his eyes, taking out his wand and twiddling it around lazily. "I'm sorry, but who are you supposed to be?" The first year audibly gulped before jabbing a thumb at himself. Colin Creevy, and you're probably just jealous, whoever you are." Draco recoiled at once, scoffing out a laugh. "First of all, that was very rude. Where are your manners? Secondly, why would I be jealous of Scarhead over here?" "You'd better watch it, Malfoy," Weasley warned, sitting up as if ready to draw his own wand and fight. Beside him, Granger rolled her eyes and carried on reading Voyages with Vampires. "Actually, I think you'd better watch it, Weasley," Draco replied, smirking before putting on a shrill voice. "If you put another toe out of line." Draco's smirk grew wider, pleased with himself as a group of nearby fifth years burst out laughing. Weasley shrunk in on himself, his scowling face flushing bright red. "Reminds me why we put up with him," he grumbled. "Sometimes I ask myself the same question," Harry muttered darkly. Draco felt something ugly bubble up inside of him at that remark, but before he could come up with a clever retort, there came a charmingly smooth voice echoing across the courtyard. What's all this?" asked Professor Lockhart as he strode over, beaming away, the whiteness almost blinding in the open daylight. "Who's giving out signed photos?" Despite the lingering nasty feeling in Draco's chest, he couldn't help but feel amused as Harry garbled his words and Lockhart spoke right over him, laughing jovially. The bell rang, and Draco turned away from the little scene he'd stirred, making his way to History of Magic. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, September 1992.
"Quidditch tryouts!"
Draco's head snapped up. He scrambled to look across the common room, squishing Gregory's face in his haste as he bounded over the sofa and rushed to the notice board, where indeed there was a flyer for Slytherin Quidditch team tryouts the following week, along with an excited crowd. "Why, Malfoy, you know you should show at least a little enthusiasm," drawled Blaise, who was also crowded around the notice board. "I'm assuming you'll be trying out as well?" "There's no need to try out when I already know I'm going to get in," Draco replied, folding his arms smugly. Blaise just chuckled and shook his head. Now, Draco knew the journal mentioned all of this. It told him he shouldn't bribe his way into the Quidditch team. And the thing was, Draco had actually even considered pleading with his father, but after the response he'd gotten when he'd begged for a brand new broomstick, he decided perhaps it just wasn't worth it. After all, his father had not been in the best of moods since July. And the more he thought about it, the more he'd stared at the words written in the journal's pages, the more he'd realized he could probably make the team anyway if he gave it his best shot. He was a brilliant flyer, after all, and he would show the team just how talented he truly was on a broom. Draco glared down at his blasted Comet 260. It just wasn't fair. If he had disobeyed future Draco's wishes, he would be holding a Nimbus 2001 in his hand right now, the fastest-known broomstick yet. But no, here he was, holding a stinking, out-of-date, fraying at the bristles, so 1989, poor Wix's excuse for a broom. He glared harder for good measure. At least his broom wasn't the most undesired of the bunch, however. Bulstrode had a clean sweep 7. How embarrassing for her. To make matters worse, it was a miserable day. Rain had been pelting down on the school since breakfast. It was now almost supper time. His feet sludged in the mud as he made his way onto the Quidditch pitch with the rest of the eager-eyed Slytherins hoping to be a part of the team.
"Right, you lot,"
yelled Marcus Flint as they reached the middle of the pitch.
"We're only going to need a new beater and a new seeker, so let's see what you got. Don't be afraid to get dirty, if you catch my meaning."
He nudged Montague and Pusey, laughing. They shook their heads.
"Let's start with beaters,"
said Montague, tapping his quill on his clipboard. Draco harumphed as he took a seat next to Blaise, watching as those who were aiming to be beaters battled bludgers in the sky. Finally, after Millicent Bulstrode hit a bludger so hard it went crashing into the teacher's stand, the beater exercises were over. and that meant it was time for the Seekers.
Alice, ladies first.
Flint grinned, holding up a tiny golden ball between his fingers. That's Nettlington to you, Flint. And that's also really demeaning, growled the 7th year, snatching her broom up anyway. Flint shrugged, releasing the snitch. Draco watched her zoom around on the pitch for a while, letting out a bored huff and leaning against his broom.
You really aren't very patient, are you?
Blaze chuckled, bumping his shoulder amicably. Draco rolled his eyes. I'd really rather get out of this rain, he drawled. Finally, Nettlington snagged the snitch.
That was great, Alice, yelled Flint as she landed. Zabini, let's see what you got.
Draco groaned as Blaze took off. How much longer till he got to show them his skill and potential? He glared as Blaze streaked through the air, going into a nosedive minutes later to grab the snitch.
Not bad, Zabini. Above average time, if I'm being honest,
Flint called out as Blaze touched the ground.
Fair enough,
Blaze laughed back.
Malfoy, you're up. Best of luck to you,
Blaze said, clapping him on the shoulder. Draco pushed off the ground with a bit of difficulty. The grass was muddy and slippery after all, but he quickly found his bearings as he soared into the air. Oh, he always forgot how much he loved that feeling. The swoop as his stomach lurched, the wind whistling in his ears. The rain was an unfamiliar sensation, however. Icy pinpricks against his skin as he circled the pitch. Draco had never really flown in the rain. At home, rainy days were a certain no-go for flying, so Draco really was in uncharted waters here. He felt he should have gotten on the team for that effort alone. After what felt like a lifetime, with raindrops streaming from his hair, Draco finally glimpsed a flash of gold hovering near the Hufflepuff stands. He zipped after the snitch with all the skill he could muster, despite feeling rather peaky yet again, desperate to know if they were all watching, if they were at all dazzled by his brilliance as he gained on the speedy golden ball. His hand closed around the snitch. A smattering of applause came from the ground below.
Not the best time, Malfoy. You're gonna have to work on that if you want to be at least a decent seeker,
Flint called out as Draco landed. Draco stared at the grass beneath him, feeling his breath coming quicker, his hands fidgeting, clenching and unclenching. That was it? Nettlington had been great, Blaze had been average, but Draco had been less than decent? It wasn't fair. He would have been Seeker if he'd not followed the journal. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. Well, at least I'm not a good-for-nothing brute who barges his way to a cheated victory. He felt himself scream back, unsure if he really just said what he did until he saw that the pitch had fallen unbearably silent, the other Slytherins all gaping at him. Draco felt his cheeks burning, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Flint was glaring at him.
What did you just say to me? He ground out.
Draco glared back, grip on his broom tightening as he slowly repeated his words as if talking to a small child. I said, at least I'm not a brute who cheats. The other players threw uneasy looks at Flint as he marched towards Draco.
That's close enough, Flint,
yelled Pusey as the Slytherin captain loomed right over Draco. Flint grabbed the front of Draco's Quidditch kit, pulling him up so he was on his tiptoes. He was so close, Draco would have counted every hair of his barely-there mustache if he hadn't been suddenly fearing for his life.
You can sodding well get off my pitch right this minute, Malfoy, he spat, jabbing a finger toward the changing rooms and shoving Draco back, which resulted in him slipping and crashing to the muddy ground.
Draco felt his lip quiver ever so slightly, his grip on his broomstick turning his knuckles white as he managed to get up and walk away, his back rigid.
Now you definitely don't have a shot, Bulstrode whispered in passing.
Where in Merlin's name did that come from? Blaze hissed. Draco really didn't know, and that scared him even more than a furious Marcus Flint. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, October, 1992. Mother says she managed to get Papa to admit he bought the tea set from some dodgy old tradeswicks in Nocturne, Daphne was saying to Pansy one evening as the second years were busy doing their potions homework. I'm so upset. It was such a darling little set. Naturally, Papa is saying he'll get me a new one, a proper one this time. Draco paid them no mind, watching forlornly from his spot in the Slytherin common room as the Quidditch team huddled by the fireplace after their first practice session as a full team. As their brand new beater, Millicent Bulstrode, so kindly predicted earlier that week, Draco did not, in fact, make the Quidditch team, let alone Seeker. Nettlington had gotten the spot after all, and the rumor mill suggested it was purely because Flint had his eye on her. "Oh, you look so sad. You should stop," came the pitying tone of Pansy, who was currently decorating her potion spellbook with little hearts instead of doing her work. "I should stop looking so sad?" Draco asked her incredulously. "Oh yes, I feel so much better now. You've really cheered me up." He threw an arm over his eyes, flopping onto his back and kicking his feet up onto Gregory's lap. "If it's any consolation, I didn't get on the team either," said Blaze, looking up from his essay. Draco rolled onto his stomach, pressing his face against the soft cushions on the sofa, and let out a long, despairing whine. "Do you want to go to the kitchens, Draco? A nice mug of hot chocolate always cheers me up," asked Vincent's disembodied voice. Draco sighed a long, put-upon sigh. "I think I'll just head to bed, and perhaps never emerge from the covers again." "Poor Draco," he heard Pansy say as he trudged up to his dormitory, determinedly ignoring the daggers Flint was giving him. Normally in this situation, Draco would have written to his father and told him how Flint had nearly killed him, that something needed to be done to mend the injustice thrust upon him, like getting Marcus Flint expelled. But Draco found he really didn't have the energy to exaggerate. Draco flopped onto his bed, scritching behind Tortoise's ears as she perched herself on his pillow. He absent-mindedly reached into his bedside drawer and picked out the sleek black book inside. No sooner had he opened the diary did words come seeping onto the page. "How was your day, Draco?" "Awful. Truly just the worst day of my life," Draco replied. There was a slightly longer than usual pause before Tom wrote back. "Do you wish to tell me about it? You know you can tell me anything." Draco did not know that. He didn't know if he could actually trust Tom. He knew that there had been more to all of this than just a sentient magical book Draco could confide in. The book being the key had to mean something. It just didn't make any sense. Yet Draco felt compelled to tell Tom everything. About how he'd felt just rotten lately. About how he'd made a scene in the courtyard, been snappy and irritable, even baring his teeth at Flint. "I didn't get on the Quidditch team. I lashed out at the team captain, and I don't know why. I wish I was the Seeker. It's not fair." "No, it's not fair, is it? You should be the Seeker. They don't know what they're missing out on." Oh, but Tom was so very kind. Draco felt himself smile for the first time all day, reaching over to dip his quill in his ink once more. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Saturday the 31st of October, 1992. Draco sat sulking in the courtyard, steam billowing from his ears. He hated the feeling of an oncoming cold. He'd been feeling just awful all week, but woke up feeling particularly peaky that morning. He couldn't even pay attention to his homework. Having gone to Madame Pomfrey for some pepper potion, he still didn't feel quite right, but the smell of freshly baked bread, spiced pumpkin, cinnamon, and chocolate wafting through the corridors did ease his mind a little bit, reminding him of the feast to look forward to later that day. He could only just see the Quidditch pitch from where he sat, perched on the banister of the great stone staircase leading out of the castle, his legs dangling over the edge. The Slytherins were practicing. Draco could see them doing sets of maneuvers, flying up and dipping down. He tore his eyes away from the blurs of green darting about in the distance as there came the sound of footsteps approaching. It was Harry, Granger, and Weasley. Draco felt his allergies start to flare up as he took in Harry's ridiculously messy hair and scoffed softly to himself. Honestly. "You can't still be torn up about not getting on the Quidditch team?" Granger asked, her face scrunching up in confusion. "You know, my parents say sports is bad for your teeth." "Hermione, let the wizard grieve, would you?" Weasley said, leaping to Draco's defense to both his surprise and dismay. The power of Quidditch. "Granger," Draco began, "if Hogwarts had a book club, and you had the opportunity to be a part of said book club, but said book club told you that you couldn't read, and therefore you couldn't be a part of said book club, how would you feel?" Granger gasped, a hand springing to her mouth. "But I wanted to be part of the book club," she mumbled forlornly, staring somewhere far away.
That right there is exactly how I feel, Draco sighed, looking once more to the Quidditch pitch. We're going to Nearly Headless Nick's death day party later. All of Draco's previous melancholy and woe was replaced by pure bewilderment as he turned to face Harry. Come again? A death day party? He asked incredulously. Yeah. Do you want to tag along? Harry asked, shrugging. We're not sure what it's going to be like, but... So none of you actually know what a death day party entails? Draco groused, watching a flurry of orange leaves dance on the wind whistling through the courtyard. The 3 Gryffindors shuffled on their feet, Granger raising a finger, then lowering it again, grumbling something about holding back from researching for the thrill of the surprise. And really, I ought to be honoring my ancestors tonight, not some old Gryffindor fart, Draco grumbled before exhaling sharply through his nose, looking into those toad-green eyes. But fine, as you so elegantly put it, Potter, I'll tag along. Draco adjusted the collar of his velvety black Samhain robes, running his fingers along the sparkling cobwebs sewn along the cuffs. Are you sure you'd rather go with Potter and not just come to the feast? Asked Vincent, who was similarly dressed to Draco except in a rusty orange color, trying to squeeze his pointed orange hat on his head. I heard Dumbledore has hired dancing skeletons. You know, it still confuses me a bit, Gregory added. Your, thing with Potter, is it an obsession, or... It is not an obsession, Draco retorted hotly. Honestly, what did they know? Draco had to stay friends with Harry and tolerate the other 2. Otherwise, his future would be in shambles. It's not like Draco wanted to miss the delicious feast, choosing instead to spend time with someone he was obviously deathly allergic to. Once Vincent and Gregory had left for the feast, Draco sighed, sitting at his dresser and running his finger along the spine of the journal. There was still half an hour to wait before the death day party, and to be honest, he really wasn't sure why exactly he said he would go when he and Harry were already good friends. He was beginning to suspect he really wasn't allergic to Harry, actually. It certainly didn't seem like an allergic reaction. He'd seen firsthand what had happened to Daphne Greengrass when she ate muskro caviar at that ball one year, and nothing like that had happened to Draco as of yet. Draco froze, all thoughts fleeing his mind as he noticed a sudden movement behind him in the mirror. Swiveling around in his chair, he surveyed the empty dormitory. Hello? He asked, a shiver running down his spine. There was no reply. Dorcas, is that you? There was nothing but silence, not even a meow. Frowning, Draco turned back around, only to cry out in shock. There in the mirror, standing behind him, was a boy with dark hair in Slytherin robes. The last thing Draco recalled before everything turned black was a pair of bright red eyes and the sound of cold, cruel laughter echoing around his mind. Draco was having the best time of his life. He was drifting through the clouds, which were made of cake and macarons and all things deliciously sweet. He was sure he must be dreaming. He could feel the pull of the waking world dragging him back. But why was his pillow so wet and cold? And would whatever was poking his face just stop already? Groaning, Draco tried to swat whatever it was away. Oh, good, said a serene voice. You're alive. With Herculean strength, Draco managed to open his eyes, taking in tawny blonde hair and wide silvery eyes peering down at him. He groaned. He felt dreadful, worse than before. Looney, what are you doing here? Draco asked, blinking up at the starry sky. More importantly, what am I doing here? Where is here? He forced himself to sit up, a weight rolling from his chest to his lap with a pathetic flopping noise. He looked down to see a feathery, bloody mess and did the only rational thing. He screamed. Why in Merlin's name is there a dead chicken in my lap? He wailed, pushing the dead bird away. He held up his shaking hands, which were crimson with its blood. Luna only tilted her head. Oh, so you weren't doing a sacrificial ritual when you accidentally fell asleep? That's a shame. I was very sure that's what it was. They do say that the strangest of magics are invoked on Samhain. Have you been having chicken-related dreams, perhaps? What? Draco looked up from the poor feathered creature, then looked around, gulping and gasping for breaths. Are we by the Forbidden Forest?
Oh, yes. I had just come from a walk after the Samhain feast in the Great Hall. Or at least that's what we call it. Did you know Muggles have an entirely different holiday they celebrate today?
Draco stopped listening as his head gave a dull throb. He began to get to his feet, trembling. Luna held his arms as they rose up from the damp grass.
And that's when I realized it wasn't a sleeping Higgy Blink at all. It was my dear cousin.
Draco let out an impatient noise. Loony, you talk too much. I have to go now. Don't tell anyone about this. With that, Draco left his odd cousin and rushed back to the castle, not stopping as he pelted through the deserted courtyard, not questioning the splash of water under his feet as he dashed through the first floor, down to the twisting dungeons below, not stopping until he was at the Slytherin house stone slab, breathing out the password and stumbling through the entrance.
Draco?
It was Pansy. Draco didn't stop. He rushed up the stairs as fast as he could, passing other confused Slytherins, grateful for once that they resided in the dungeons and their house was always dimly lit. Draco barged into his dormitory and slammed the door shut after him.
Oh, fine then. Don't have the goodie bag I saved for you.
There was a loud thud against the door after Pansy had her shriek, which Draco guessed must have been the goodie bag she mentioned. But Draco couldn't really bring himself to think about goodies, chocolate, or any kind of sweet as he jumped in the shower and scrubbed himself clean. All he could think of was that boy he'd seen in the mirror before he'd woken up covered in feathers and blood. He was quite sure the Journal of Dreadful Things never mentioned this.